So I think the readings this week touched base on a lot of things we talked about in class. We kind of talked about how bestsellers, there's a difference between like the best books and then the books that people like the best. Um, and kind of talked about that in the first article about how there's a lot of negative attitudes toward bestsellers because of that. And I think that I can agree with that. For example, like 50 Shades of Grey, as we talked about. And then also that article talked about how publishers target like certain social or intellectual classes, and we also touched base on that in class where we talked about how 50 Shades of Grey kind of targeted like moms, like that kind of age there. So it's kind of like a lot of connections into what we talked about in class. So that was kind of cool to see. Never really talked about anything like about bestsellers before, so it's really interesting to see what the public really thinks and like what researchers actually think on it. So the O. Henry story, I thought it was really ironic that they called like bestsellers, like a lot of bestsellers being love stories, and then this whole story turned out to be like kind of more of a love story kind of thing. I thought it was a really good little short story, but I thought it was funny how it talked about how most bestsellers have like similar plots, but we also talked about that in class. Like all the Nicholas Sparks books kind of have similar plots where they fall in love and stuff like that. So I think that's really interesting that, it's kind of like more evident that people are pointing it out to me now that I notice it. So that was kind of cool to see in that article. And then in the first article, it talked about how to be a bestseller, you have to go from like traditional writing to non-traditional writing, and I was just kind of a little confused on what that means. So like, what would non-traditional writing look like, and why does that sell better than traditional writing? Because don't most people prefer to read traditional writing is kind of the question that I had. I know I prefer to read traditional writing. I guess maybe like would the O. Henry one not be traditional because it was written more in dialogue? Kind of just confused about the whole difference between traditional and non-traditional. But also in the Gerald bestseller story, it talked about like how authors write to the audience that they want, and I think that that's true for all books, not just bestsellers. So I was kind of also confused on that. But other than that, I thought the readings were very like tied into what we talked about in class, and I was able to gain a little bit more information from them.